Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on activating DMPs, turning standards into practice. We have a lot of stuff to cover with you from a few different working groups, so I'm just going to jump into it and tell you a little bit about the session today. To start off, as you know, we wanted to start with the acknowledgement of country. Can I use the handheld? Sorry, I'm on my toes up there. We want to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet. We pay our respect to their elders past and present. The traditional owners are the Turrbal and Yagara people, and we want to recognize them. I encourage you to take a moment and look afterwards, learn more about their culture, and just make sure we are acknowledging the land that we are on. I also want to welcome new RDA members. So this is a session of the Research Data Alliance Plenary. There are 6 guiding principles at the heart of this community: openness, being community-driven, consensus, nonprofit and technology neutral, harmonization, and inclusivity. And all of those are really well represented in the working groups that we're here today. We have a representation from a lot of different service providers, a lot of different areas and industries, all kind of building consensus, openness, and trying to harmonize the research data management platforms that we work for and serve. So, for the agenda today, we're going to start off with a mentee survey, just so we can learn more about the people in the audience. We'll go through a little bit of background of the working groups in the session today. We're going to hear from OS Trails and some of the evolving DMP practices there. We're then going to talk about the DMP Common Standard maintenance review, new issues and updates to the Common Standard. And then finally, we're going to get into the API Common Standard, introduce that for people not aware, and talk about updates from tool providers on that. The most important part of today's session is our open forum at the end. So we want to have a lot of time for discussion, think ahead about questions. Some sessions will have a little bit of time for questions, but for other areas, like for the tool providers, we're going to go through those very quickly so that we can get to the open forum at the end and not do individual questions there. The one thing I want to note before we get into the survey is about our collaborative notes document. So you should be able to access this document from the IDW app. If you click into the session, you'll be able to get the link to the RDA page, which has a link to our collaborative notes. And it's important there, if you could put your name on that document so that we know who's there, add any notes throughout the session, that would be a big help for us. We'd love to know who is here, what you thought about it, and have everybody help make this a really engaging session that we can take notes from after. So, to kick us off, I want to do a quick mentee survey, and I'm going to switch over to another tab for a second, so don't worry if you missed this QR code. We have another way to join. All right, so it should be the same QR code, and there's also a joining code if that is easier for you. This is my first time running a mentee survey, so if there's any issues, it's my fault. Let me know what the issues are so I can fix them for next year. So I'll give everybody a second to answer those. There's a few questions there just to get a sense of your familiarity with machine-actionable data management plans, APIs, and your industry. This will help guide our presenters throughout today to understand, what kinds of things to focus on in our discussions. Take a look, try to figure out when people stop tapping. Look at some of these results together. All right, so we have a wide mix of roles. That is very cool. We've got some researchers and faculty and students. We have data managers and data librarians and other. These are the top categories that we have here. The results are still rolling in, but it looks like the top one is data steward or data manager. It's very exciting. Hope you all are going to be interested in the work today to learn more about data management planning tools. All right, machine-actionable data management plan familiarity. Looks like the modal response is people have a basic understanding of machine-actionable data management plans. That's great. People of every background hopefully can benefit from this session. We have people all the way from never heard of machine-actionable data management plans, and we have people that are actively working with them. But most people, they've heard the term or know a little bit, but not a lot. So I'm looking at all of our presenters here, myself included. Let's all keep this in mind, introduce terms as we talk about them. All right, next, how familiar are you with the concept of APIs? Kind of similar response distribution here. People have a basic understanding of APIs. Some people are quite familiar. There's nobody that's never heard of them. That would be okay if you hadn't, but good for us to know. And there are some people, that are experts or that know just a little bit about it. All right. Next, we have where is your organization with regards to machine-actionable data management plans? So just for the quick recap for the people that were less familiar, machine-actionable data management plans, are these data management plans that are version, living, updatable over time, and can interact with other computer systems. So, your organization might be planning to integrate with these sorts of plans, or they might have already, so that's what the question is getting at. So most people either have no plans or are thinking about them, but there are a smaller number of people that are currently implementing, have implemented, or have concrete plans, which is very exciting to see. And hopefully the work from the working groups that are presenting today will help you in those plans. Our second to last question is what groups are you a member of? So I can see we've got some representation from the top three groups are the ones that are hosting this session today, the Active DMPs Interest Group, the Common Standard Working Group, and the API Working Group. But we've got a good number of people that are in other working groups as well at RDA, and then the most number of people are none of the above. So welcome everybody who is not a member of this group. I'll remind you again at the end, but I encourage you to join any of these groups if you're interested, even just to lurk or follow along. All right, and then finally, we have what are you most interested in learning about in this session? People want to know good advice, progress of the community, why we should use machine-actionable plans. Could scroll down, yes we can. Examples in practice, actively using DMPs, how people have implemented them, localization needs, the status of technologies, new involvement, implementation, new updates. All right, these are great. Hopefully we can answer all of these questions. We'll see what this gives us and if this is worth doing. All right, people are interested in community progress, examples, standard updates, and implementations. All right, thank you all so much for doing that. I appreciate the responses. And let's get back to the rest of our session. So next we have Kevin, who's going to give a little bit of background and overview about the session today and the groups that are hosting it.
Great. Thanks very much. So actually, I'm going to try and use the mic here. So my name is Kevin Ashley. I'm director of the Digital Curation Centre. And for context, I'm one of the co-chairs of the Active DMP Interest Group. In fact, I think I'm the only one of the original co-chairs still left and engaged with this. It was interesting seeing what we've just heard from the Menti presentation. So I want to give you a little bit of the background of how we got to where we are today and what we're going to be trying to do in this session. And the fact that a number of you are not engaged with any of these working groups so far means perhaps it's a little more important for me to talk about some of that background. That was something I wasn't clear about before today. So I hope most of you are familiar in some ways with RDA, that one of its main purposes is to set up working groups that are focused task groups set with 18 months to produce some kind of output. And there are interest groups which don't have a fixed timeline, but often act as kind of umbrella groups for these various working groups. So the Active Data Management Plan, or ADMP interest group is going to refer to it, was established quite early in RDA's history. I can't remember exactly when we got the approval, but it was around about the time of Plenary 3 in Dublin, so somewhere around 10 years ago. And as an interest group, it doesn't itself produce outputs, but it acts as a forum where we can identify the kind of things that we need to set up working groups about. And there's two organizations that are represented here, the University of California Curation Center, from where Becky hails, and my own organization, the DCC, realized that we were both at the stage where we had active pieces of software services that many people were using that were generating DMPs, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to end up with some kind of fragmented landscape and have a standard for how we represent the machine-actionable elements of DMPs. And given that at the time, I think basically we were the only two services around doing this, we could have just sat down in a room and decided ourselves, but we thought, no, we want to work in the open, we want to engage everybody who could be engaged, and therefore we decided to work through the RDA to do this. We had a workshop at IDCC, the International Digital Curation Conference, in early 2016. It was followed by an interest group session at the Barcelona plenary that was April of 2017. And there we were really just brainstorming ideas for working groups. There were 5 promises of proposals. 3 proposals actually came out of that. 2 of the working groups, one of them ended up getting engaged with lots of the work around software management. Another was looking at issues around publishing and exposing DMPs, and the other was the Common Standard Group. That finally produced its outputs in 2019. So now we have a common standard for DMPs. By that time, there were a lot more folks involved, a lot more tools of various sorts that were producing and engaging with DMPs. But that group then went into maintenance mode. We'll be hearing a little more about what they're doing in a moment. And it was some years later, I think a few things were happening around 2020 that stopped us all meeting together in person. And it slowed us down a bit, but we realized certainly by 2023 that, again, many of us implementing these tools, the same thing, were developing or had developed APIs. We had 2 APIs to the system we developed at the DCC. And again, there was this worry that perhaps we were seeing a fragmentation of the landscape. And this would be another area that would be worth standardizing. So those group discussions began in late 2023. And I think we now have a final version of the statement of work for that group. And again, we'll be hearing a little more about what that is. But that's now in very early stages. So this is something that you can get involved with and influence how it's happening. So to summarize again what these different groups are trying to address, the active DMP interest group is, in a sense, an umbrella. It's there to discuss almost anything related to data management plans and, importantly, identifying the areas where we need to do work in future and relating back what different working groups do to each other. The Common Standard Group was about defining what could or should be in a data management plan and how can it be represented with a view to making it as machine actionable as possible. Now, it describes itself as a metadata application profile, and I have issues with almost every one of those words about whether it's really metadata or data and how can you profile something. But let's not worry about that for the moment. But that gives you an idea of what it is that is doing and what it's not doing. It's not saying anything about representation, or it's not saying anything about what you can do with that data. The API group, instead, is talking about how do we interact with systems that hold DMPs? What questions can we legitimately ask of them? And what types of responses can we expect? What changes, perhaps, can we make through an API to the information that's held in one of these systems that says I have all or part of a DMP? And why do we want APIs? Well, we want APIs because systems need to talk to each other. Research information management systems, repositories. You'll hear of a whole bunch more examples, I'm sure, when we get to talking about the API group later on. So that, I hope, gives you some kind of picture of where we began more than 10 years ago now, I think, in all this, where we are now, and gives you some context for what we're going to hear now, which is presentations from each of the groups, and then some we're going to hear about from the tools, and then some open discussion about all of this. So thanks very much.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to present how the work from this working group that Kevin mentioned is put into the action of one project. And this project is All-Stress project. What is All-Stress project? So All-Stress project is a Horizon Europe project with 15 national pilots and 8 thematic pilots that in the future they are going to evaluate and to check the outcome from the project to see how this fit with them. But what is the main goal of this project? Is to make the European research system more connected across the whole research life cycle. In the project, we map in the journey from planning, tracking, assessing the research. So different tools and content types work together for effective, responsible data management. Practically, we are upgrading existing platforms to interoperate better, and we are making data management plan, scientific knowledge graph, and assessment frameworks or assessment workflows more automated and linked. All of this in the project is to sharing a resource pool that we call All-Stress Commons, and the results are going to be reusable across regions and disciplines. Regarding DMP, how All-Stress is going to be these objectives real, so we organize something that we call pathways. And we can see something that Kevin mentioned before, is that reconnection between different platforms, repositories, SKGs, DMP platforms, and we are mentioning here is called fair assessment, but we can call it assessment workflows. We organize this to create the different connections between the platforms, as I say. To provide this in the DMP ecosystem, we create a baseline toolkit instead of a full platform that we call DMP interoperability framework. What is this DMP interoperability framework? This interoperability framework has three pillars. It's the RDA Common Standard, the All-Stress application profile, and the API, which is going to try to connect the DMP platform with other systems. The common standard, my colleague Marek is going to explain you more in detail in a few minutes, but this is what Kevin mentioned before, and it's the baseline for all of these tools to talk the same DMP. But what is the application profile that we propose for All-Stress? The thing is, for the common standard, there are some information that is not already there, but our pilots in the project require specific information that they want to model inside the machine-actionable DMPs. So in the project, we are trying to map in these extension requirements into the All-Stress application profile to provide a solution for the pilots. Then we have the DMP API. This is one of the outcomes from the other working groups. As I say, this is going to be one of the pillars for the interoperability framework for the DMPs to be able to connect the DMPs platform to repositories, to SKGs, or even for assessment platforms. Now we have something else into the All-Stress. We want to try to fit a bit the gap that we have with the DMPs, the evaluation of the DMPs. So in the project, we are developing a DMP evaluation service. This service is aligned with other of the outcomes from the project, that is a interoperability assessment framework. And this interoperability assessment framework is provided a transparent, structured way to model what has been tested and the result of the test. So in this service, what we wanted is to map in the requirements for funder, pilots, or specific institutions, the policies into the test, to be able to automate much as possible the DMP evaluation and not to get continuously for the person or for the institution to evaluate the DMP, just reading a PDF document. Instead of that, we want to provide a DMP service that can provide you, like, okay, we want to check a specific aspect into the DMP, and we are going to tell you, yes, this machine-actionable DMP is aligned with the aspect you wanted, or is not. Of course, there are some of the information in the DMP that they are not able to get automated checked, but we can provide, let's say, the information that is not possible to check in an automated way, at least clearly and directly to the user. How is this working? The idea is to instantiate the service and connect with the DMP platforms that can call it and provide the same format of results. In this way, all of the DMP platforms can interchange the results and the tests that they are using. What is the current status of this DMP evaluation service? There is a proof of concept already deployment. This proof of concept has around 9-10 tests implemented, but what is next? So in this year, we are planning into the project to collect the more requirements from the pilots, and in the next year, we are planning to implement them and deploy it. In this way, for the second part of the next year, we will have, let's say, a full DMP evaluation service ready to connect with the DMP platforms. Already there are some platforms like Argos or DAMAP that they have in their plan the connection with the DMP evaluation service. Yeah, that's it for the side of Austria's project using DMP work from the working groups. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Marek Suchánek. I'm from Czech Technical University in Prague, and I will be presenting briefly update on maintenance of the DMP Common Standard. We have also in the room Peter Neish from University of Melbourne, and Tomasz Miksa could not join us today. To make it quick, we discussed that during several previous plenaries that we want to have this 1.2 release with some of the updates. It took a bit longer than expected, but as you can see from the slide, we are moving there basically to fill this done column in GitHub issues. What has been done already? We basically followed the issues in the GitHub repository, and most of them already are prepared. I will say what is not yet. But one of the things that changed that we added creator to dataset and also flag if the dataset is reused. Some improvement also in the ethical issues report, as it used to be just URLs, but we got issues from some institutions that it doesn't have to be always just URL, but maybe some internal identifier. We recommend to use DataSite vocabulary for the contributor roles. We added affiliations that has been for quite a long time, so now we have affiliations of contacts, creators, and contributors. We plan to have, this is not yet done in total because we are starting to see in the standard some basically common structures that would welcome some abstraction. So here, for example, agent for creator, contributor, and contact to share the common properties, but we have some issues with that because of the naming, and we don't want to introduce now a break exchange. We will get to that, how we can proceed with that. What we also added or are reworking are identifiers. This is now being finalized, so it is more permissive. So you can have multiple identifiers or on most of the entities. And we also introduced related and alternate identifier, similar to what DataSite has, and both for DMPs and datasets. And we did some minor clarifications, updates of the descriptions, declaration about the compatibility with DCAT, etc. The next steps would be to finalize this actually quite shortly after this meeting. So any last comments on the issues being done or already already done before we release 1.2 are highly welcome. So please take a look later on the GitHub issues and pull requests and comment if you have some issue with that, how we actually updated the standard. We need to also prepare finally this mechanism for extensions, not just because we need that also in the Australs project, but because that is also something hanging out there for a long time, because institutions and national initiatives want to make their own extensions based on their local needs. So that's something to be somehow done. We already know that some institutions do that already, just by adding new fields or extending the number of entities, etc. But we want to have some standardized way how to do these extensions. And finally do some final cleanups in the repository. We already did some. We have now the README file as a single source of truth. We want to shift from that as well, but we also, for example, relocated the DMP Common Standards ontology to the separate repository. And we want to have this release as the last one in both old and new structure and continue just in the new structure for convenience. For the cleanup, as I said, we moved this ontology out. It used to be in the past the Google spreadsheet and some synchronization tool. We also get rid of that. The README is now restructured, JSON schema reworked. That was needed also for machine-actionable DMP API to be able to code generate some of the fragments of the code for API. And we still need to do some of the following steps. But those should be already a bit straightforward. Then the question after the release 1.2 will be what's next. Because during these issues, we've identified that there are some things that we would like to change, but actually we would break things too much. So instead of 1.2, we would go into 2.0, breaking change. And it will be a question how to do this, if we still do it in this working group, which is in maintenance mode, or if we should do a new working group, just focusing on that and gather these breaking changes and do a new release. So how to proceed with that? One of the examples is, for example, change of the language country codes. It may seem trivial, but if we change how we require it in the standard, everyone would have to change it, and that would be a breaking change. Similar for introducing this agent, because we need to rename a lot of fields, for example, related to the identifiers. And if you want to, for example, enforce the data site rows, now they are just suggested, but if you would like to say, no, you must all use data site rows, it would be a breaking change again. So wherever we want to be more strict and more machine actionable, it would actually introduce now a breaking change. Yeah, and the PID's representation is now always like this value and type, and it's not always very convenient also for extensions. So if you want to have your own internal type, it will be now possible, but it would reduce the machine actionability, of course. So please check what is there, visit the repository, visit the issues, visit the changes when comparing to the last version, 1.1, and basically that's what I'm asking you to do as a call of action. So thanks. I don't know if we have space for any quick question now. No? So questions at the end.
Kim. I'm a data librarian at Washington University in St. Louis, USA.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you are using the data set role. Is that different from, credit role taxonomy kind of thing?
Yeah, it is. We were considering, and it is also captured in the issue, multiple vocabularies for roles, because we want to have like roles not necessarily of those that are writing or creating the DMP, but that are involved in the data management process. So,
Right. So, you know, there are 14 roles in the protocol.
yeah.
And I know initially DMP go over as a 3 out of 14
Mm-hmm.
connected. And unfortunately, the principal investigator was a link to investigation, which is basically network.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't quite work. So I don't know what, can you give us some examples of what data side role you plan to implement?
Well, we don't like implement just some of them. We basically said that is the most suitable vocabulary that can be used in this place.
So I think it's important to distinguish here between what the standard says, which is what Marek is talking about, and what a particular tool or system might implement, which may not cover everything. So I think you're talking about something specific about how DMP tool behaves, which is, but any of our particular systems, we may deal with some parts of the standard world and not. I think this one is, the standard is allowing any of those roles to be used. It's not insisting
No.
be able to.
Yeah, we cannot also insist because of the breaking change, but yeah, thanks.
Any other questions now, or should we?
We can keep it at the end. Thanks.
Right. Hello, everyone. I am Andrea from the CC. I'm speaking about what is the technical integration progress that we have. Oops, that's are the notes. That's are not bad. Well, what you see here is pretty much a DMP. Someone called this ontology. I am a software engineer. I call this ER model, entity relationship model, pretty much the same thing. And if you see, DMP is made by many parts. We have contact, contributor, cost, project, funding, host distribution, data set, licenses, security, privacy, technical resource, and what so on. What we are trying to do with this open API is to make it possible to inject information inside the DMP. At the moment, all our platforms, independent from these tools, you are able to pull information from the platform, whereas what we want to do through the Common Standard API is the possible to inject information inside the platform. Work in progress, we saw from a few slides before that it is possible, for example, for a DMP to create a DMP from scratch, just giving an API, so there is an interaction between machine to machine. Or we can retrieve a DMP, we can update a DMP, we can delete the DMPs, or we can list the DMPs based on some criteria. For example, we wanted to list by a DMP by certain dates range, or we wanted to list a DMP by a data set. And inside of the API, there are so many filters. And I recall when we were in Vienna with Marek and all the other contributors, thinking about how we wanted to search a DMP. Well, whatever. Fantasy is so huge, and we want to search by date, by data sets, and by contributor. And for example, if was the weather in Glasgow at that date was, for example, raining, okay, let's go. And I try to implement that one. So, and you can do the same things for data sets. You can manage data sets through the API. It means that you can do this, what software engineering call CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. And the same for person. Oh, there is a typo. I wrote person twice. Okay, fair enough. And essentially, you can even link in a person, for example, through the orchid. And you can do for licenses, and you can add licenses, you can create the licenses, and so on. And this for valid for repository, and which you can do this for every single entity that's make a DMP. That is what the API is doing. Now, work in progress. Well, search, filtering, and query, as I said before, is very extensible. There are so we try to think about every single case. Probably we are missing something. So as Marek suggested, please have a look about the standard. It's there, it's published, it's on GitHub. You can have a look. And if we are missing something, just let us know. We are more than happy to see if we can integrate one more filter. We provide what is called an open API document, which is suitable for code generations, which means that you can call a tool and it says, oh, I want my API in F#. And you give to this tool our definition of the API, and there is a software which is able to create the API for you. And thank you, Kevin, 2 minutes. You can generate both client and service library, which is quite important because this opens new doors, for example, for a repository. If they don't want to create, for example, a software engineer that make it to create an API, they can use this sidekick and try to create this client and server side. And here there is the link. How you can generate this API. We already have done some work in progress. Current languages that are already implemented, you see Golang, we have Python, we have TypeScript, we have PHP, and obviously we are open for contributors. So if someone wanted to create an API in COBOL, well, welcome, and probably we can also implement on this kind of language. And so the scope of this API is to create one single API, so one repository is able to push information to every single DMP platform around the world. So who implemented this API? You wrote once and you write everywhere. That is where we want to be. Okay, now.
Thank you for the API introduction. So now we're going to go into a lightning round from each of the service providers here. We've got 7 service providers that are going to talk for just a couple of minutes about general updates and their progress in implementing the API. The goal is that all of these service providers implement the same API so that you can integrate with all of them much more easily. So I'm going to kick it off with the DMP tool. So our main thing that we're working on right now is a rebuild of our tool. So last year I presented an RDA that it was coming next year. I'm excited to say this year it's still coming next year. So we're looking at early next year. We want to make sure we get it right, more importantly than getting it out fast. So our goal is to get the entire narrative of the DMP in JSON format. We want an API that works with the entire tool. The goal is that anything you can do in the UI, you can do through the API. And as we're building this, we're actively involved in the API group so we can follow the common standards. So we want to be as compatible as possible. We plan to be, implement all of the standard endpoints and whatever we can do with the API, and continue to use the RDA common standard for the DMPs. So when we launch our rebuilt tool, that's when the new API that will be compatible with the standard is going to come out. We want to be compatible from the start. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here about the rebuild because the focus here is about the general tool services, but we're going to have a lot of changes coming in the rebuild about having a project level. We really want to, our goal is about making it easier to do best practice templates and plans, so we have more machine-actionable question types. We're going to make it easier to copy existing templates and a number of other UX improvements. I do have one call because I don't want to talk about it in this session, but if you would like to look at the new tool and give any feedback on it this week, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to talk more about it or let you look at the tool in development. And then another quick review of just other projects we're working on over at the UC Curation Center. We just wrapped up a pilot project about working with machine-actionable DMPs. So a number of people mentioned in the Menti, they want to see examples of what people are doing with this machine-actionable plan. So I encourage you to visit our pilot website. We had 5 institutions in the US develop prototypes of working with machine-actionable plans to see what the benefit could be at their organization. So some examples of projects people did are things like passing information from a DMP to different campus units to aid in communication, getting notification when a new DMP is created, and using reject scripts to look for specific topics and assign it to the right person. One university is using LLMs to review DMPs and give feedback to people quicker than their human reviewers can get to it. So a lot of cool projects there. And then next, we also are working on a project called DMP Chef, looking at large language models to draft data management plans. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow at 11:30 in breakout 1 if anybody is interested. So those are my lightning talk updates from DMP tool. And next we have the data stewardship risk.
Okay, so it's me again, now with different hat, or actually 2 hats of data stewardship wizard, the orange one, and fair wizard, the blue one. And basically our tool is very flexible. We have something called knowledge models to represent the structure of a questionnaire, and then we have something for document templates, and basically you can create a document from a questionnaire and document template, and currently we also have machine-actionable DMPs in this way. So you can export machine-actionable DMP, you can also import it, that's another step. But with the API, it's a bit complicated for us because any institution can adjust their knowledge model and create different document templates. So how to actually do that? And we will have to do something with the mapping and allow mapping of the knowledge models to the DMP Common Standard, which we talked about. And then we will be able to do something over that with the common API specification. So we will expose the API in this way. It's still work in progress, of course, because we are now just basically finalized the first version of the common API specification, and now we are prototyping this way. Because another thing that is needed is the opposite way. So we will be required to do this mapping in a way that basically once you send something to the API, it also gets back to the questionnaire and to the DMP in our software. So that's how we will implement it in a way so all institutions can take it and reuse it in their knowledge models and questionnaires and document templates and still have it flexible for their needs. So keep it flexible, make it efficient, because of course with all these mappings and transformations, the optimization in time and memory will be crucial, and of course make it secure and reliable. Basically respect the settings of the questionnaire, who can see it, who can adjust it, who can comment on it, etc. Because our system has also some live collaboration. That's it for me. Thanks.
Right, so in terms of DMP Online, the machine-actionable DMP API, the code will be released on open source, and is still work in progress. We have not published yet, but it will come very soon. And we try to make these connections in order to have an integrations with the DMP roadmap, which is one of the open source projects that we're still integrating. The API progress will be visible online, so every time that we implement one single entry point for all these ontology that you saw, you will see these in real time through the GitHub repository. And we have at the moment one pilot project inside the University of Edinburgh, but we are still open for opportunities. So if any of you want to integrate with the platform using the open API, we are open for discussions. And one of points that we are very keen is the term of sustainability. And what we are looking is an API that is energy efficient, that is the environmental impact will be as low as possible. And in terms of the next steps, and we have also just released a new API, which is called DMPC, which is standard for DMP sent events, where we can send events from the DMP platform to the outside. For example, when a plan is updated, when a plan is deleted, when there is a request for feedback for the plan, and so on. And that also will be presented on IDCC conference next year. And we have an interesting two projects, which is implement the web sustainability guidelines from the W3C and the web accessibility guidelines 3.0 that are not yet released, but I collaborate with the W3C on these guidelines. So we are already approaching, and because we think that accessibility and sustainability, they work all together to make the platform which is sustainable and accessible to everyone. And obviously, we are in Australia. We are also looking for the RAID project. And now we have DMP Opidor.
Yes, hi, you're going to see me a couple extra times. So we had a couple of issues trying to get a virtual speaker set up. So I'm going to present for DMP Opidor and their progress on the machine-actionable DMP API. So at DMP Opidor, they have a structured data model that's compliant with the RDA Common Standard. You can import and export plans available in the Common Standard through the UI and the API, and they use a GraphQL API in their tool. The current work that they have, they're looking at dedicated forms for software research outputs, and they're also working on integrating topics into their research outputs, so looking for adding topical guidance, registries, and forms. And what's next? They're looking to an external platform for exposing DMPs, which may include DOI minting, plan versioning, stakeholders usage, and views. So, very quick update. Apologies that you don't get the full presentation here, but they've been actively involved in our API group. And next we have Damak.
Okay, again me, like the previous speakers. DAMAP. I'm going to present DAMAP. DAMAP is the DMP tool from the Technical University of Vienna. We developed this DMP tool in the Technical University. And this is the current status for the DMP tool. So we have different custom integration with OpenAir, with Zenodo, and with the CRIS system into the university. Currently, we only export the machine-actionable DMPs. But what we want to do when we implementing the DMP API and the full common standard is we are not going to get this custom integration. We are going to use everything across the API, the common API for DMPs. So we can integrate with OpenAir. This is a scientific knowledge graph with the common API. We are going to integrate directly with Zenodo and the CRIS system using the same API. So we are not going to have different integration system there. And we are going to be able to export and import DMP, machine-actionable DMP. Currently, we export, but we don't import. So with the implementation of the API, we are going to be able to import DMPs from different sources. What is the future deployment for DAMAP? DAMAP currently is on-premise, so it means each institution that want to use DAMAP have to deploy DAMAP in their servers. But now DAMAP is migrating to the cloud. So the idea is to move DAMAP to a cloud service. And in this way, each institution doesn't need to deploy DAMAP inside, only create an agreement between DAMAP team, the DAMAP, and then we can instantiate institution DMP platform in the cloud.
All right, hello again. I'm going to be sharing a couple of slides, from one slide for the DMP assistant who recently joined our API working group. And so this is a tool put out by the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. So they are presently examining the potential for integration between DMP systems and other applications like ethics applications, research management systems, and other. They're exploring the development of a new API that is going to conform to the common standards. We'll be joining our meetings to be part of that development. To deposit DMPs and metadata to new versioning repository alongside DMP Assistant, which will in turn be accessible and machine readable. So, apologies, I'm just reading off the slides here, but we wanted to make sure we get across these work from other people that cannot be here. And then finally, our last tool here is another member of our API working group is from DataPlan. And so DataPlan and RDMO are both part of the German National Research Data Infrastructure initiative, which involves research tools for specific fields. And machine-actionable DMPs are helping them integrate between these different tools. So DataPlan and RDMO are both DMP service providers, and the machine-actionable standard enables interoperability between these different tools. So in this particular example, this slide is showing the mapping between DataPlan and RDMO, which each has its own data model and uses different fields. But the machine-actionable DMP standard sits in the middle as a common reference point. This is, and on the right, we see this in practice, the architecture for how users interact with either DataPlan or RDMO, and then are both connected through the machine-actionable API. So instead of building custom integrations between every tool pair, they can use machine-actionable DMPs to provide a single standard that all tools can adopt. This eliminates vendor lock-in, enables seamless data exchange, and ensures research data remains interoperable across platforms, making data truly fair. And so that is a great tool to end on. This is just, again, a small selection of examples and very quick lightning updates from our tool providers. Hope you all got a good update from everybody and enjoyed the presentations. We're now going to go into our open forum, and here's where we really want to hear from you all and get your questions about the API in general, about the common standard, machine actionability, and so let's kick it off.
Yeah.
Do you want?
I don't know, did anyone, you've been talked at now for nearly an hour. Do you have any questions on any of what you've just heard? I mean, we don't want to get into a maintenance session about any of those particular tools, but again, just wait for the microphone.
Sorry, I already introduced myself earlier. Again, my name is Sun-Young Kim. I'm a data librarian at WashU Medicine. I have a question about evaluation metrics you talked about. So is this like making sure DMP created using DMP tool, for example, meets the standards? Like, is that how you envision? So, the NIH was kind of developing something like that. Using LLM. So it was Ravi from NIDDK, program director, initially developed for researchers, PIs. But then he switched directions in less than a year. So now they're developing for program officers who are reviewing DMSP. So actually they can grade. So if DMP2 can kind of prevent that from happening in a way, so you can kind of use the AI. I mean, we have a great, many DMSP templates in a way, sample plans, good example depending on the data types and all. So if you kind of feed that to, I don't know if you're using AI or, what you're using to evaluate the DMSP, but, hear more about it.
So in the project, in the Austrian project, we are creating like assessment framework. This assessment framework is to help the people to define what they want to check inside the DMPs, because for different, let's say, stakeholders, they don't want to check exactly the same. So they have different policies. Like in another speaker was telling in another talk before. So one university have a specific policy, and they can model that policy in a specific way. when you can see, okay, I want my data is going to be only in this repository or in this format and in a specific, let's say, specific parameters for your DMP. The idea is to try to modulate those parameters, and we can implement the test for them. So the tool, the DMP, the evaluation service can implement this kind of test, and then each tool that are able to connect with that can say, okay, we can provide this to the user in case you need to fit with this policy or these specific aspects of the DMP.
I think responding more generally, this is come across. This is the great benefit of having this API standard, is that those services like evaluators can be built completely separately from the tools that we use to generate the DMPs. So it's possible to have multiple evaluation services. It's possible to have multiple services create DMPs, and any of them can interact with any of them. So that idea that different institutions may have different policies, different people may want to use different evaluators, it makes it all possible because we have a standard way for those two things to interact. And that's a critical thing about it.
I was just going to add on just something, not exactly what you asked, but relevant to evaluation metrics, and just kind of share a little bit of insight from the API working group. One of the things that it's come up a lot in the group is that, all of these different tool providers, we're all like mostly compatible with each other. Like we all use the common standard, but there's slight differences in how we implement things or how we, define certain categories. And so one thing that we plan to do as part of the API is have an evaluation tool for the API where tools can use this to check how compatible they are, where you would like import and export a DMP and write a tool that would help you figure out, okay, what fields are dropped, what's different from the standard. And so our goal is that, we're never going to all be exactly the same. We're not going to implement everything exactly the same way, but we're trying to make things as consistent as possible with each other, and then just be really transparent to users about, okay, hey, this service is going to support all of these endpoints, but this is how they define this data. This one supports 80% of the endpoints, and they're working on getting to the rest. This one, some, for example, some services support multiple funders and some support just one funder for a plan. So there's always going to be little differences, and hopefully eventually it's very clear, about exactly what each tool provides in the API, making it as similar as possible.
The DMP tool uses a theme, right? So in the new version, I'm going to just use the NIH DMSP template as an example. So the element 2, the tools, there's no theme for that one, so it's empty. So we have a guidance tab, right? So I assume when you evaluate, I picture you using it as a kind of, guardrail in a way, because that's a guidance DMP tool puts out. So make sure your DMSP template use a guidance to fill it. But like if the element 2 of the NIH DMSP doesn't have any theme in a way. There's nothing to pull. I don't know if you, in a new version, you're adding more themes to cover that part, or, when you evaluate, you're using that as a kind of guardrail or standard.
I mean, I'll just say, again, this is a question about one specific tool. I've been trying to address here more general questions about the standards that we're doing. I don't know if anyone wants to. Do you want to quickly respond, Becky, about that question?
Well, I'll just say that to second that, we want to focus on the broader API, not get into too many specific questions. Happy to talk to you about that later. I think that kind of thing is the tool-specific UI, and so everybody implements things a little bit differently. But some of the things we'd love to we'd love to get questions about either across the tool providers, the API, or we'd also just like to hear from everybody. Do you have, example use cases? Anybody curious about how something would work if you're going to interact with the API? Or questions about, the evolving common standards? And any kind of discussions that people want to start relevant to all of us are great.
Roman.
I'm Roman from Oscar's project in Europe and another project that is called Isidore. I want to just talk about these two projects because they are open code projects with several projects that are proposing things. They use DMPs. They use sometimes machine-actionable DMPs through your interface. And often we have the issue of the completeness of the machine-actionable DMPs. If they are empty, even if it's machine-actionable, it will not work. And that's a big issue. And my question is completely open. When you evaluate, you can evaluate the functionality of your DMP, you can evaluate the contents, the completeness of the contents, and it's highly related, in fact, with data quality assessment. So for that, my question is, okay, machine actionability is something fundamental. One aspect is fair, the fair principle to be checked. We have also groups that are working on that. I have seen also, I'm happy to see that the world accessibility guidelines that are taken in account, that's also aspect on functionalities and access to the information, but the data quality one is crucial. And we have this reflection between project managers and PIs in Isidore, 154 partners, and Oscars. It will be 70 projects accepted. Is this DMP reusable, on how to assess the reusability of these DMPs, even if you use one context on one other. And I think that machine actionable DMP can help for that. But we would like to work with you on this standardization of what is reusability.
Quite a meta question there about the usability of the DMPs as opposed to the data underneath it. Anyone want to respond on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question in my view. So to make sure I understand your question, like, it's really getting at, like, is it really machine actionable if somebody makes everything public and uses the metadata, but then their DMP is empty, for example? In my view, it's always going to be a tough balance between having too many restrictions and too few on what a user puts out there. It's something that, you know, we've explored a lot. It comes up in a lot of different contexts. If, like, okay, should we require every question to be answered? Should we require every project member to have an ORCID? Should we require a ROAR? Should we require checking against a grant database that your funding is accurate? And I don't have an answer just to spoil this right now, but every decision that comes up, if we make things too restrictive and we say, like, okay, every question has to be answered, sometimes there's legitimate reasons to leave something blank. And if we don't do anything at all, then people can just publish blank ones. And so we just have to be really careful in thinking about, like, where is that balance we're drawing? We'll probably each, I'd love to hear from other people too, you know, we probably each are going to come to different conclusions. It's probably going to vary by field. I tend to lean more towards a little bit more open and let people publish things that aren't perfect, just because I have seen people go through the process of making their DMP public, and it can occasionally be burdensome enough that people just drop out of the process and don't share at all. But that means that some bad data is going to get out there. It's just a balance. If it's too restrictive, nothing gets, you know, okay, everything's high quality, but you only get 10% of the stuff that might have been out there. So that's kind of where I lean, that, like, I would rather have more of it out there, even if some of it's not great. But I think if a really legitimate concern, we've got to think about as we all develop.
Yes, in terms of flexibility and quality of the DMP, I am with Becky. So there are so many cases across the entire world and single organizations that is difficult to make too much restriction. For example, I can create a DMP without any founder. And that will be a question, is founder a required field? No. And you can ask a question maybe after, for example, there is possibility to have, for example, sensible informations. And then you can ask at the start. But there are some institutions, for example, that says, oh, I don't need that the researcher is going to answer this question, because that is a question that will be laid after, because the flow of the DMP, and there is someone else that is going to check the DMP in terms of quality and says, oh, that could be, for example, data that could be restricted, so we needed to ask other questions. So the scope of this API mainly is to try to create an opportunity to make a standard. I come from a different industry. I come from the private sector, and I was speaking with other people. In 11 years, I wrote 200 APIs for the financial market because there is no consensus to how to detect first name and last name, and you have F name and L name, and you have first underscore name and last underscore name. So the scope of these, the common standard and the open API, is to give to everyone, as Kevin said also before, that we can evaluate based how we want, but I know that I can call, for example, one tool or the other tool, and contributor on the person is always the same things. So in terms also of software development, the cost is going to be down, and there will be also an improvement in terms of the environment, because we don't need to deploy again another software, because that is what is the scope of this API. Obviously, as Marek said on the slides, we are going to work towards 1.2, but there is already progress inside the group to work version 2.0, because we have other requirements coming through. And what we try to achieve is to make the focus as let's try to create. Obviously, a software, when it's working, is obsolete. So you write the software and then you need to maintain. World is changing. DMPs that 10 years ago or 15 years ago are different from what we are today, and where we will be in the future, we don't know yet, but at least we try to create a standard where everyone can speak with everyone using one single interface. And we have an example for power sockets. How many power sockets we have, difference between all the countries? Well, we try to avoid this mistake and try to make a standard across all the platforms. That is the thing. So in terms, it's probably better to have less restrictive and try to create more free, because we needed to cover different cases than not be too much restrictive and then start to create friction inside the organizations.
Did you get an answer, I think, to your question there, Raman, or?
No, I understand.
The microphone also, but just if I understand well, when you want to evaluate DMPs, you want more perhaps to evaluate DMPs interoperability capacities more than all DMP, because DMPs, you know, it's like data, it's a digital object, and you have the veracity of the data, you have the sufficient and appropriate metadata for the F1, are in F4 from Wilkinson, data well indexed. That's also something that you can't evaluate only through the standard. But indeed, I agree with you, that's necessary. And but we would like to join your work to our work on our level. We want to try to work on minimum metadata requirement for a specific level of quality through projects, and that could be integrated in machine-actionable models.
Again, I think there's an interesting distinction here between, I think a lot of what you're talking about, I would see as, it's about policy to an extent, rather than technical issues. So it's policy issues about what you would expect to see and what quality standards you want to meet. And we very much, I think, within the group so far, that RDO span out on this, we've focused very much just more on a more technical level of saying, if this thing is in your DMP, this is how it's represented. And we're not, apart from some very minimal requirements in the common DMP standard on certain mandatory fields, there's very little policy information. There's very little policy information in an API. It defines how you can ask questions, but it doesn't say much about what should or shouldn't be in those answers. But that doesn't mean that those policy questions you're talking about aren't important. And I wonder, again, whether there's a question here, I'm thinking with my hat on as part of the interest group, whether it's worth having another working group that looks at those next level issues about saying, okay, we have a technical standard here, now let's start talking about how we use that and what should or shouldn't be present. Okay, remember, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Badger. I'm a data librarian at Ohio State University in the U.S. I just thought your comment there, Kevin, was interesting, that I think there's some intersection, though, between the quality of the content of a response or that policy piece and perhaps some of the technical implementation. It's not a one-to-one, but I'm thinking of what I've started seeing a lot in manually reviewing data management plans for researchers at my institution. As more researchers have started to use LLMs in order to generate these data management plans, there are some logical inconsistencies in the content. For example, they will state that they're going to share data through a certain repository, and also that they're going to use a certain standard that repository doesn't implement. And so I wonder what pieces of this might be useful in collaboration with, like, the fair sharing registry, where there is already a technical implementation of some of that relationship between different aspects that appear within a data management plan. Where certainly you can't do a full evaluation of the content through technical implementation, but perhaps a piece of it.
Regarding like the inconsistency, so it's something that we want to target in the DMP evaluation service inside the Austria. So we have identified that inconsistency. For example, they say the data, they want to share data, but they say the license is MIT license, so the license doesn't fit with the type of data that you want to share. And it's something that the service of the automated evaluation can check. And it's something where we already implement something for that in that case. So these kind of, let's say, inconsistencies that we can check only just seeing the content of the fields without any interpretation of human interpretation. That is something that we can to evaluate and provide. Okay, look, your DMP has this inconsistency, or you don't pass this specific test, and you can go in a transparent way with the assessment framework into the project to check which are you testing exactly. So that is something that there are some mechanisms that they are already there to check that.
You raise an interesting case, and I believe that the first thing to do is to share these cases. Many times we are not even aware about these cases, and there is a group, please enter in the group and share your idea. But there is something, because you raise the question and says, well, someone says, I'm going to use this standard, and the repository doesn't support the standard. And again, I go back, how I can do a quality check. How I know that that repository supports one standard and not another standard. And how the DMP platform can check from another repository and says, these are the things, the standards that are available, and I stop the user that probably went to Charlie, and he says, oh, can you fill these questions? And ChatGPT said, here we go, that is what we have to. Oh, I'm sorry, my repository doesn't have this standard. These are all the cases that probably is going also to what Kevin said. We need to start to create some policy and try to implement the policy that become procedures and create something. But many times we, as the DMP platform, we are not aware about these cases. And so to resolve these questions, we needed to be aware. So that is kind of open science. So shared experience, and we try to see if we can resolve the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, and it reminds me a lot of the last question, actually. It's a very similar idea about, you know, the quality of the DMP or the data. And, you know, a decision that we made as the API group, which doesn't mean this was the right call, but, you know, when we, you know, would come up with a lot of these questions about, you know, requirements or policy or implementation, we have taken the stance so far of we're not going to mandate anything. We're trying to keep this as simple as possible to implement. And so, like, here are the fields, here are the endpoints, and it's up to tools to do more than that. And I say that we decided that not because that's the end of the discussion, but because, you know, we're here at the open forum. We're here already to get feedback from the community who are not in these biweekly meetings. And so I think this is clearly, there are now multiple questions on this, clearly something that we need to think about. I think for me, I don't know if that's something that we should look at as the API group or the new group, like Kevin was saying about, you know, like about where this work should come, but clearly there's a need for this. And so I would encourage all of you to be part of the active DMPs interest group, because I think it's very related to making DMPs active and machine actionable. And maybe that's something that the API needs to change, maybe that's something in the common standard, or maybe this is a new group that's really going to focus on this quality and policy and like what does it actually mean to make a meaningful DMP that's usable and checked for this, because I think we've been focused very much on like trying to, like anytime something comes up about like should we require a certain authorization standpoint, or you know, we tend to default to let's let tool providers make their own choices there because this is going to be hard enough to implement it as it is. But I think we need to keep talking about that. Even if it's not in the API spec, we need to figure out where that does go.
Just to bring through this, there's a sense in which I'm getting a kind of sense of deja vu here. That I mean, you described this in the context of people using LLMs to construct things, so that's clearly a new problem. But the issue of the kind of DMP that emerges from it is not a new problem. I'm very conscious, so I began this job I'm doing now 15 years ago. That was about the time the first version of DMP Online was released. And when I started there, I remember strong debates amongst colleagues in the DCC and elsewhere about how much we should provide examples of what we thought were good DMPs to people when they were trying to create one. And there were some people who thought you've got to show people an example of what good is, because otherwise how can they learn how to do this? Because there was a feeling down here, you're trying to introduce a new cultural practice for many researchers. But there were other people who equally strongly felt that if you do that, all that will happen is people just copy and paste from, oh, well, that won't work, that got through there. So, and as a result, they wouldn't actually think about what was in it. And they could fall into just the same problems that you described, not because they'd used an LLM to construct it, but because they'd copied and pasted from another example without really thinking, and therefore produced something that was still just as inappropriate. And I'm not sure we ever really reached agreement on that issue of how much do you try and make things easy for people by showing them examples or by saying that you can copy from one that you've done earlier, as opposed to saying, no, the whole idea of this is to make somebody think about what they're going to do with their data. And if they don't think about it, then the whole point is, there's no point to the exercise, really. You know, you're describing a mechanical process, but it's not, but the researcher hasn't committed to it. And I'm not sure I have a simple answer to that. And whether a working group will solve it or not, I'm not sure.
Yes, a short reaction about that, just because going deeper in technical side, there are some tools that can permit flexibility, but also provide some framework for the flexibility. And I'm thinking about, but I'm sure it's implemented in many of your solutions. You didn't have time to perhaps precise that. For instance, you have annotation ontologies. You have the provenance ontology that is also a model with 3 objects, the agenda, the activity, that could permit to customize your basic machine-actionable DMP, sorry for the basic, to a Rolls-Royce DMP, you know, that could permit to increase, at least when you have proved to your community that the DMP is reusable and reused, that's a challenge, that you can reuse it as a way to increase the quality of your data, and indeed, after what is the objective is to manage data. And that's the link between machine-actionable DMP and this reusability that I would like to foster. And I don't know if we can associate what we try to do. We are starting a project doing several areas at the European level, but it can be open to everybody on your démarche in different DMP. Okay?
My name is, does it work? Yeah. So my name is Anka Hienola. I'm from Finnish Meteorological Institute, and I'm a climate scientist. And I strongly hate DMPs. I cannot tell you how much I hate them and how much my fellow researchers hate them. And probably 99.9% of the researchers don't ever go back to those DMPs. There might be like 0.1 weird ones that are kind of going there. We don't use them for anything, and we still copy-paste because for us it's bureaucracy. And we still don't see the use of it at all. Maybe the funders kind of, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, let's not go there. And at least the way they are now in Europe, for example, for the European Commission template, there are like a lot of stupid questions that the researcher doesn't know how to answer, to be honest. I had several people who were basically crying in front of me because they had to fill in the DMP and they never got back there. So my question here is, why do we bother with this DMP? Okay, it's obligatory for us, I understand that, but why don't we make it so that it's very, very easy for the researchers to fill in those templates, whatever they are?
Yeah, by all means. Okay. Another voice again. Remember to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm from Tohoku University, Japan. Can you hear me, right? In charge of developing a new DMP for our university. Yeah, of course, last year we released a new system, DMP, and then it helped the researcher to use it, fill it, and at the end, download and submit to the agency, which is the normal flow, right? Yeah, well, so actually DMP is very important. It's very important because it's not only for tracking our research, but if we fill it in the right way, that means at the beginning of the research, during the research, and at the end, I think it can be a very good asset for us. Okay, that's a good question. Not for who, I don't know, but in my point of view, I think the university itself will benefit about that because it can have a track or history of the research and the data, and who managed the data, and how did you manage the data, and how did you store the data, and also the funding agency also can have that track. But who will benefit on that? I cannot answer that question, but in my point of view, it's very important for the university and for the funding agency. Thank you.
Thanks. So my name's Dave Connell. I'm from the Australian Antarctic Data Centre down in Tasmania. I think I can answer your question. At least I can give you a sort of solution, but I can't guarantee that Europe will adopt it. So for us, the data manager, I'm a data librarian, data manager. My job is to archive and catalogue the data from our scientific program. For us, DMPs are for me. The researchers fill them out with a bit of help from me, and I've gone to a lot of effort to make the form as bleedingly simple as I can. There's not too much on it, and after that, I don't care if they don't look at it again, because it's for me to go back and look at. And then I get back in touch with you sort of after 1, 2, 3 years and say, hey, you said you were going to archive that data set. It's now time to archive that data set. And I take care of all of the management of it from that point onwards. So that's the approach that we've taken, is to try and minimise the amount of effort that the researchers have to put in, and then after that, it's a tool for us as data management. That's the way we go with this. this has definitely generated a response. That.
Maggie Smith, I'm from Geoscience Australia. I'm in a similar role to Dave, look after the data catalogue. In terms of a DMP, I can give you a use case of what happens when we don't have one. We've had projects that have ended, projects that are about 14 years old, 14 years worth of data. Project's ended, no one's left the building. It gets handed to us to archive because it's a government requirement. In my personal opinion, archiving it, fine, we're retaining it. We're not archiving it because we don't know anything about it. So a bit like Dave's saying, it would have been great if there was a data management plan done initially, so then at least we've got some context around why the project was started and all that sort of information. So the DMPs are important for the data to live on. If we don't have it, the people that end up looking after your data can't do anything with it. And then future researchers, it's lost to future researchers because you don't know what it is. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think for many of it is that it's the scare stories about the things that have gone wrong in the past when we didn't have that discipline that made people come up with the idea in the first place.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the institution or the national initiative, how they implement DMPs, because basically what we are giving either like a maDMP group or tool providers, we basically give a tool to institution, like a hammer. And either they hit a nail with that or they hit their own hand. So that's how we do it. And from the perspective that I have with our tool, it really depends. We have a lot of institutions that implement their DMP questionnaires, the guidance for their researchers to what they can do. And they also integrate it with other systems. So it, for example, pre-fills information from CRIS system. So it prepares a lot of these things for them. And basically they don't have much to do there. And definitely not writing a lot of text and using LLM to fill it in to get rid of that, but actually to think about what they will do with data in their project and select the choice that is correct for them. So it really depends how the tool is used in the end.
So I'm really sorry. It seems we've finally got you all going, and now we have to wrap up. So Becky's just going to take about 1 minute to wrap it all up. But just to say, given that there's so much interest in this now, given that a number of you said that you're not members of any of these groups, sign up to this, and that's a way we can continue to have this.
Yep, I completely agree. So I'm going to just go to my last slide just so you have some links to go to. The big thing to do, advocate for machine-actionable plans at your organization. So I think we hopefully got you interested in this. We kind of talked a little bit about some other things, but that's kind of one of our calls to action. The more important one is to join our groups. So particularly to continue this discussion, I have more things I want to say about this. We have questions we didn't want to get to. The interest group is for these ongoing discussions. So the Active Data Management Plans Interest Group in RDA, that's the name. You can go search it with RDA to group. I would love to start a discussion on this. I have a lot of things I would love to say. Hopefully the one thing I'll say really quick to plug for the API, part of the goal of the API and the Common Standard is to make DMPs easier because we know they are burdensome for researchers. And so one of our goals across providers with the API, can we pull information in? Can we have things started? Can we make it simpler to fill these things out? So if you're interested in the Common Standard, we have a working group for that, looking at the maintenance. And if you want to talk about what might be able to be done with the API, we have a working group for that as well, and that is actively being developed. We have GitHub. If you want to look at the issues directly or make comments, you can do it there. You can provide input on issues, start proposals, or start discussions. All feedback is helpful. The last thing I will say is please, again, those collaborative notes document. If you can go add your name, we'd love to know who was here. We would love to hear from you all again. Start those discussions, and let's keep this going in the RDA forums. So thank you all so much for being here and for being active participants, and hope you have a good rest of your conference.